This is the Next Best Series podcast, and today I am joined by Jack Thorne, the co-creator, co-writer, executive producer of Adolescence. Jack, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
I found Adolescence to be quite a companion piece in a way to Toxic Town in a multitude of ways. I also get from watching Adolescence that it felt very much derived from the perspective of someone who's a parent and also from a place of concern with everything going on in this generation and how younger generations adapt to social media and how that affects them growing up. I'm curious from you and Steven's perspective when creating this series, when you guys were just, passing the baton back and forth, tossing ideas around, at what point did it turn into from an idea to an actual, like, okay, this is a necessity. We need to make this series?
That's it. First of all, you're the first person that's talked about any parallels between Toxic Town and Adolescence. And I thank you very much for that, because it's both shows mean a lot to me, and I think both shows are looking about the same thing, which is how to look after our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? How do we do it? How do we work out how to parent in this world where there's so many forces affecting our children, and they're very different stories in lots of ways, but they have a soul, I think, that speaks to each other. So thank you very much for that. Secondly, in terms of when we decided to go for it, to be honest, the way Stephen works is he's a bullet. So the gun is fired more or less from the first conversation. I started writing things down, that there wasn't any sort of and actually the story, we weren't sure of a lot of things as I was writing episode one. I then went back and rewrote episode one when we were sure of those things, but we were still working so much out as I was working through all that. And because so much of episode one is procedural and so much of it is a sort of celebration of procedure, doing the research to make sure all that was right, while we were also figuring out the bigger blocks, if you love it, actually in some ways was freeing. So the writing started from about 5 minutes into the first conversation.
I love how Steven's also talked about multiple times. It's a whodunit, not a whodunit. I think that allows Adolescence to, get past a far more traditional series would have had everyone wondering the whole time, oh, did he do it? Did he do it? And I think that ultimately doesn't matter, and more so the ramifications of that action. Exploring that, and you mentioned the research you did and going past, it feels like the real show starts after the first episode.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, you may be right. I think that the foundations of the house are hopefully built in episode one. The sort of concrete on which it all fits, and then episode 2, 3, and 4 are the windows being put up, but they're windows from different directions. And I think that's what the whodunit gave us freedom to do, that it gave us freedom to look away from Jamie in order to look at Jamie. And I think if it had been a more traditional show, that need to check in with Jamie and to find out what he was doing would have made episode 2 feel very irritating, for instance. You would sort of be going, why am I seeing this stuff? I want to be with my central character. I want to be trying to understand him, and this isn't working for me. So I think the whodunit gave us freedom to explore in different holes, and I think the whodunit also meant that the one-shot format worked a little better than it might have done, because we weren't trying to tell a traditional story with an untraditional means of telling. The untraditional means of telling met an untraditional storytelling. You know what I mean?
Yes. I'm glad you bring up the one shot. I think that is in terms of something on the surface when a lot of viewers watch, some people might not notice. A lot of people like myself who, we watch stuff like this constantly for a living are like, oh, wow. It could have been in a way gimmicky, but I feel that it gave an operatic sense to it, a very like theater, especially towards the back end of the series. It wasn't distracting in a way, but I felt, it gave a more cinematic feel to, again, like episode 2, you're seeing Ashley Winters just go through this school and he's just talking to students until, like, of course, the chase at the end. Was the conversations you had, with you and Steven and the director, Philip Barantini, was that from the start you always approached telling that story in that manner? Was it?
It had to be, and it was written very specifically for the one shot. That if I'd been writing this show in a traditional way, there's no way I would have written the scenes in the order that I did.
Mm-hmm.
The one cardinal rule was that the camera never goes anywhere on its own.
Okay.
So when you're writing the show, you're constantly writing crossovers and you're constantly spinning plates of different types of story in order so that the one shot is motivated. But it also forces the story, and this is, I think, the freedom it gave me as a writer, it forces the story to be incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't show, for instance, in episode 3, episode 2 is all about him looking for a knife ostensibly, and then in episode 3 that story is never resolved. In episode 4 that story is never resolved. It gives you the freedom to say there are questions that aren't going to be answered, and because you are seeing this story through a partial lens, through a one-shot lens, that also allows the story to be partial in its telling. Do you know the writer Craig Mazin?
On The Last of Us. Yeah, Chernobyl, yeah.
So Craig's a mate of mine, and we were having an argument about, on his podcast, he talks about the Wanna being a direct forward indulgence, and the argument I had with him was, I actually think it gives enormous freedom to a writer, both in that partiality, but also it makes the script supremely important. When the script is locked at the end of our technical week, at the end of week 2, before shoot week of week 3, and it wasn't always totally locked, but it was largely locked at that point. That's now the story. When you're going through a traditional process, like there's loads of other stuff that happens after that. The edit process, the story gets transformed again. I've had shows where the amount of ADR demanded by commissioners, demanded by executives, meant that the script felt almost rewritten in the edit. In this show, the idiosyncrasies of the scripts, the way that the story doesn't work, actually got cemented into the telling, and that, I think, meant that the writing was given a prominence that sometimes in the way that the engine of the TV business sometimes gets discarded as the producer becomes more powerful in the edit. So I really loved the one shot.
I think also, I'm glad you mentioned the edit, because I feel from your perspective, the way you probably have written the certain camera moves and dissolves must make, at least for Philip to a degree, the edit's somewhat smoother, no? Like, at least it feels like there's less, you have to constantly be cutting, and more so just which takes is the correct one. I assume, doing that process where you're filming for an hour continuously, there's no room for mistakes. Was there an episode that it found itself to be like the most you guys had to constantly keep doing like multiple takes, like start from the back?
Well, all of them we multiple takes. Every single one of them, there was a minimum of 10 takes, but I think probably a minimum of 12. And then we were deciding between them as to which is the take we used. On every episode, bar one, it was the final take that we used.
Oh wow.
On episode 1, it was the
Hmm.
second take we used, which is really interesting because, and that came largely from Stephen, in that he felt the storytelling was fresher in the second take, and that the episode lost its energy the longer the shoot week went on. Whereas
Hmm.
with everything else, we were discovering constantly through the process and changing all the time. The 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 episode where I felt like the the one shot came alive was the first episode we shot, which is episode 3.
Okay.
And you wouldn't have thought that episode 3, because it's all set in one room and it's just basically a
A
conversation,
conversation. Yeah.
would necessarily be about the one shot technique.
Hmm.
But watching Matt Lewis, our brilliant cinematographer, and Phil decide where they were looking as they were telling the story of this episode, as they were covering this conversation, where to look for 8, 9 lines of dialogue, and when to turn away, it just expanded the whole possibility of storytelling for me, because it became all about them listening, because it couldn't be shot in the traditional way. If you're shooting a conversation traditionally, you have one face close up, the other face
Yeah.
the two shot, maybe different angles on the two shot,
Hmm.
maybe one from the doorway to create some different sort of energy for you. But you're there's a grammar to it
Yeah.
that you're playing all the time. With this, right from the start, we had to throw away those grammar books, and that really helped, I think, make that episode work in a way that I wasn't expecting it to.
I would love to talk about episode 3 more in detail. I think from a writing perspective and also a show running perspective. So I think I'll just start with Owen Cooper is just utterly brilliant. I think when I first heard not only that that was the first episode you shot, but that was like his first time behind a camera, I'm just gobsmacked because you would think he's possessed by the ghost of some of the greatest, actors just reincarnated into him. He seemed like a complete natural. Before we get into the details of filming that, I would love to know the process of, casting Owen and deciding that he's the one. Because the role of Jamie, the way you guys write him, so many layers peel back. In episode 3 is where you get the full image, but a lot rests on the shoulders of whoever actor was going to play Jamie, and that's pressure that honestly is a lot for a young performer. I would just love to know more about how you guys brought Owen into the process.
I mean, I can claim very little credit for the casting. I was part of it. I was watching tapes, but I was not central to it at all. The people that did the hard yards were Phil and Shaheen Baig, who's our amazing casting director, who saw hundreds and hundreds of kids. When we saw Owen, we knew he was something special. But the truth is, it wasn't until about halfway to the end of that first week of rehearsal of episode 3 that I realized quite how
Oh.
special he was. I was sat, it was a tiny little room, it stank of sawdust because they were making the police set. The police set was
Okay.
sat in the same space, right? So they were making the police set as we were shooting in this hospital set, in the training facility set. And so there was sawdust everywhere, and I'm an asthmatic, so I was struggling to breathe. And it was Erin, Matt, Phil, me, and Sarah the first. And watching Owen come to life, watching Owen take control of it, come from being this sort of nervous kid that doesn't quite know what he's walking into, to becoming Jamie, was one of the most astonishing things I've ever seen. And I'd say it was a result of 3 factors. One, his natural brilliance, because he is naturally incredible. Like you say, he is a star of the future. He is someone that is going to change acting. The second reason is the careful and tender direction of Phil. And he really was careful and tender with him as he was guiding him through the stages. And the third is Erin. Now, Erin is one of
Fantastic.
those actors. It's the third time I've worked with Erin, and the previous times have been in theatre. And I did this play with her. I did A Christmas Carol with her, where she was playing Belle, and Rhys Ifans, you know, the actor Rhys
Yes.
Ifans, he was playing Scrooge,
Oh,
and
that's
and
perfect.
it was amazing. And there's this moment in the final act between the two of them, and each night I saw it, it was completely different. And I said to Rhys, "Why is it different each time? What's changing each time that's making it so different?" And he said, "Acting opposite Erin is like playing jazz."
It's just free
And
flow. It just, it evolves. It's constantly emulating. Yeah.
and to have an actor that can do that, that can play jazz with you, meant that Owen was free. You know, that Owen, whatever he gave to Erin, she would give back. And the two of them started creating this music. And I think everything flowed from that point on. Everything, the whole show flowed from that point on. Just that interaction between the two, with Phil gently guiding it. And honestly, it was like a magic trick.
I think also seeing that dynamic play out between, Jamie and his therapist, I'm curious from a writing perspective. When you're writing Jamie, this is a young boy who, again, he's a young child. He's committed an atrocity. He's someone who is quite impressionable and malleable. I think it's concerning in this time that a lot of this red pill, uh, overtly machoistic, content that is influenced. I was lucky. I'm older than like these younger kids now that have grown up like deep in the roots of TikTok and all this content that is, targeted and programmed them and having an effect we're already seeing. But so like when you're writing Jamie, it could have been a character far more telegraphed and what he's thinking, what he's experiencing. I found the subtle lines, the subtle evolutions and changes in his behavior that kind of came to that. When you're watching it, you want to feel some sort of sympathy, and you do, but you're also, oh, he did it. Like we know he did it, but when you see it, you're like, this is a boy who's been corrupted in a way. I would love to know when you and Siva were writing those cues, the certain intricacies in Jamie's character when writing it. You're like, this is where you could see certain trigger words are clearly affecting him. Well, those like minute details. I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah. So the way that each episode started in terms of the writing process was a conversation between me and Stephen, right? And I was always the typist. I was the one who wrote the dialogue. We just talk and talk and talk until we felt like we had a story worth telling. And then I would write a script and then I'd send it to him and he would give some feedback on it and I would write some more. And then slowly we got something going. With episode 3, he said to me, "Write a David Mamet play." Okay, bye. And so he sort of just said, I think this has to be all about dialogue. This has to be all about you working Jamie out. And that was a big ask. And there were lots of things bubbling around. But the truth is, there were 2 things that I thought were really important for Jamie in that scene. The first is he really likes her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean fancies her. He might fancy her. I don't think that's the important
He's a
thing.
lonely child. Like there's a sense of like I'm getting some sort of companionship in a place also where he's so isolated that it's an escape. Yeah.
Exactly. He's alone. He's alone. He doesn't like everyone who's around him. He's under the most pressure he's ever been under in his young life. Mm-hmm. He's done something that's horrific. This person's come in that treats him like an adult and that talks to him like an adult, and she matters to him, right? So that's the first thing. So anything that he doesn't like about himself, he's trying to hide in that thing. So when you say things are slipping out, they're slipping out because he's losing control of the image of him that he wants to present to her. The other thing that's going on is, although he's aware of what he's done, he still doesn't understand why he did it. Mm-hmm. There's bits of him that do, right? but there's a lot of him that doesn't, right? Because he's a kid. And so trying to work that line and all the stuff like incel, manosphere, he wouldn't describe himself as an incel. People describe him as an incel. He wouldn't describe himself as one himself. And he wouldn't use words like the manosphere. The ideas that have come to him from those different units are things that he's absorbed and he understands part of, but again, he doesn't understand all of. So it was trying to find ways to let information about him seep out and let his truth seep out without ever letting, whilst being aware that he's doing everything possible to control the image he's presenting to this person. Do you know what I mean? Like, and he knows that she's important, and he knows that this is legally quite important for him. But yeah, it's that wearing of that mask that felt really, really important to him. And it's not primal fear. You know, in primal fear, which some people have compared us to, he is deliberately concealing himself behind a mask. And he is in control of which mask he presents at what point, until the mask is sort of torn off him. In this, he isn't, his knowledge of himself is so limited.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's such a child in so many ways that the mask that's there is this sort of great big wrestling act. And it was trying to represent that wrestling act that was the most important. But how I wrote him, I wrote me. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, or at least I wrote a lot of me into him because I felt a lot of the feelings that Jamie feels. I wouldn't have done what Jamie did, but I felt a lot of the feelings that Jamie feels when I was that age.
I would also, you know, we've talked a lot about Steven and his role as a co-writer and helping build the show with you. He's also just talk about another brilliant actor. Like every time Steven pops up in something, like this is just one of our best character actors working today. And I think the work he delivers here is unlike anything he's done in his entire career. Was he always adamant from the start that I wanted to act in this role as Eddie Miller, or was it more so you guys were writing and he floated the idea? Because I feel like there's a good thing going that you can kind of see the image of the series when you're creating it, and then I could just imagine Steven like, oh, what if I play Eddie? And you're like, sure, you're great, I don't doubt your capabilities, but were you concerned that maybe you didn't want to overextend your hand in any way to, like, you know, spread the plate too thin?
It was always
okay.
So this is the sixth thing we've done together. The previous five has always been I was the writer and he was the actor.
Mm-hmm.
I love Steven. I mean, I love him as a person. I love him as an actor. I think he's just one of those people that the sun shines out of. And when I think about the sort of, you know, when you go back and you think of the sort of person that you would follow into a war, and there's actually so few people. I wouldn't follow Keir Starmer into a war. I would follow Steven in. If Steven said, we got to go now, I would go, okay, we got to go now. He is so full of love and so full of passion. And yeah, Eddie was written for him, and it was written as a love note to the man he is, because in lots of ways, Eddie is closer to him than many other parts he's played. You know, in that he's a loyal, good, caring, gentle man, and because he's so good at playing any part, you know, he often ends up playing the sort of evil, or the mix up, or the
aggressive,
or because he can do it, he can do it, and he's exceptional, and those are often the best parts. But the goodness of Steven, I was so pleased we had an opportunity to let that out, as well as the confusion and the relationship with masculinity that he has. That's not a traditional relationship with masculinity, even though he's built like a bull. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and all
it's very Bob Hoskins. I know people have thrown that comparison a lot, but
I love that.
It's, you know, another way child masculinity.
Bob Hoskins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that sensitivity, because it's moments like in the finale where he's just driving down the car with the wife and kids, and they're just chatting, having a normal time. And the way he just says, "How you doing, love?" Like there's just a gentleness to it, and it feels so comforting, and it's refreshing to see, Steven in that register.
It's when we were doing one of the bits, and he was demonstrating. That was a bit where he was demonstrating, a violent act, throwing the kid off the bike, and then there were people at by the place that we were filming who were watching and were slightly anxious because they didn't quite know what was going on. And then Stephen approached them, and it was like he was shedding his clothes for them to say, "No, it's all okay, it's all okay." And that's Stephen all through. He can go like that, and then go in the other place. The commissioner on this show from Netflix, there's a number, but we were led mainly by Monica Qureshi and Toby Bentley. And Toby is someone who he script edited a show of mine in 2016. I've known him forever, and there was a moment in a script meeting where Stephen suddenly turned on and became Eddie and started really shouting at Toby to demonstrate something. And Toby was just almost falling off the chair. And then 5 seconds later, Stephen was all smiles and going, "You see, that's what I mean. It's something like that." And he's capable of. He can turn on a dime, and he's capable of everything. And I really want this show to showcase his ability to be everything. And I'm really proud that it seems like it has showcased him. Because he is exceptional.
I think if anyone takes a look at your work or Steven's work, you guys have been a part of just so many good projects that have, found their audience. And I think it's kind of an underestimation to say that Adolescence has found its audience. I think obviously, I'm very happy that the show is this massive success. Like lots of people are watching on Netflix, but I'm sure, constant successes like that isn't always something that's a given in this industry. So when you hear the news of something like Adolescence, possibly or is just being shown in schools across the UK, a PSA of sorts to show the harms of social media in this generation, does that make you feel as an artist that you're doing something right? Like I'm glad this has found the right time and people, and it feels like I'm doing something. I know that I like my purpose, and I've always known that I've continued searching for new artistic curiosities and projects, but I'm glad this was the one that has really taken a life of its own.
It's amazing, and it's been completely overwhelming and completely brilliant. And like you say, Stephen and I have been trying to do work that's had an impact for a very long time, and to be part of a show that's having this sort of impact is sensational. I've also been lucky enough to be in schools having conversations with kids since the show has aired, and the important thing for us was never, "Oh, we've got all the answers, watch this show and suddenly you'll understand something." It was, "Watch this show and then let's talk." Let's talk as a community. Let's
have a dialogue about this.
Exactly. Talk to your mum on the sofa. Talk to your teacher in your school. And maybe people in power should talk about what they can do about this too. But to be in a room where I remember one girl saying to me, "The thing is, I don't talk in class anymore. I used to, and then I stopped. And I stopped because there was a group of boys that whatever I said, they would make me feel so small, I couldn't keep saying anything. So now I'm silent." And she was 15, 16 years old. And you're talking about years of someone not contributing and having their education. If you can't ask questions, you're learning. Your ability to learn is diminished. And so hearing those sorts of stories, hearing boys talk about the way that they're expected to look, the baggage that they're holding, and it is different from when I grew up, and it sounds a bit different from when you grew up. You know, I grew up in an age before the internet, largely. You're much younger, but this new sort of pressure is so intense, and it is changing the way our classes work. You know, teaching unions saying that female teachers are being physically threatened or even abused by boys. It's terrifying what's out there, and we do need to be talking about it. And if we can be, hopefully we're a good show that people enjoy watching. That's what we really want to be. But if we can also create a little conversation around how we help these boys, do you know what I mean? Like, you know, how we change this dialogue for them, then we've done some really important work. And I really hope that we are part of that conversation.
I love hearing you talk about this because in an emotional way, it feels such a stark difference from the ending of the series, which is quite profound, but I feel ends on such a devastating note. But in your voice right now, there is this tinge of hope.
Yeah.
I feel. Is that how you feel? Like, is that how you feel?
Absolutely.
Like we need to, like, we can't really divulge on just keeping this negative energy towards it. We have to look for the best, look for the better.
These are our children, and they're being harmed, and of course we can change that, because, you know, there was stuff about, you know, I'm in favor of what Australia is doing, which is a law which tries to get kids off social media, right? So a social media age of consent, right?
Yeah.
And someone said in response to that, but that will just force the kids onto in darker places. That will force them into 4chan or Reddit or you know, somewhere on the dark web. And it's like, no, that will force a tiny proportion of kids in those places, and then we'll try and rescue those kids. The majority won't even affect. The majority won't notice that they're not being fed this stuff in the way that they currently are. And my son, who's 9, who has no relationship with social media yet, would be spared the torment of what it does to kids' brains. And I don't just mean with, like, you know, the manosphere stuff. I mean in terms of the anxiety it creates.
Oh yes, and how people interact with each other. I grew up, you know, right when like Instagram and Snapchat was starting, and I was like in there, like I was like Facebook years, but I wasn't like the TikTok, you know, aggressive like for the boom of that. So it is a lot, and I think what the series is doing is spotlighting a very important topic, and I'm glad that it's getting the recognition it deserves. I'm very happy for you and Steven and the whole cast and crew, and I think Adolescence is one of the best series of the year, and I'm 100% certain it is something we are not going to be done talking about for a while. So, Jack, thank you so much
very
for
much.
this.
Thank you. Really nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you too.